Hello, true believers, and welcome to another edition of BK's Bullets. My name is not Brent Casina. My name is Jim Efantis, and from time to time, Brent asks me to review comics for you. Today we're taking a look at Quiver. Now this is by Kevin Smith, Phil Hester, and Andy Parks, and it follows the exploits of one Oliver Queen as he has an out-of-body experience, to say the least. But before we get started on this review, if you like what you see, please consider commenting, rating, and subscribing to Brent's channel. He would greatly appreciate it. Now, I don't know a lot about comics, as I say. I know even less about the DC comics, but I do know about Arrow because I love the television show. So I feel that there's some connection to this solely because it is Oliver Queen. Now, this interpretation took place back in 2001, and it was a run of comics that, from what I can tell online, was meant to kind of reboot or at least reinvigorate the Green Arrow comic line. Because you kind of look at Green Arrow, and he's kind of dorky looking. I mean, unfortunately, they didn't change that at all. He's still got that look, but he's got this kind of bizarre Robin Hood look. I think it's probably meant to feel like a feel-good book, and one of those books that you just smile and read. He says really goofy things. He's got really goofy, gimmicky arrows, like the arrow that has a giant boxing glove on the end, which he uses to knock people out. And it's just really kind of cartoony, corny, campy, I guess. At least that's my takeaway from it. What I feel like Quiver tries to do is add a layer of importance to the character and to kind of give us a different look at who he is. And I think largely it succeeds in that part. It is somewhat a coming-of-age story, at least in terms of returning to greatness. It's not like a prequel or anything. He's very clearly the Green Arrow through the entire book, but it isn't really until the end that he kind of comes to terms or comes to a peace with himself. And I always compare books to The Dark Knight Returns because by far it's my favorite, but I think this actually does really apply for once, that there really is a connection here between what Oliver Queen is going through and what Bruce Wayne went through in that comic. Now, I'm going to get into some spoilers, so if you haven't read it, I'm going to hold it up one more time so you can see what it looks like. I highly recommend you read this before you hear me talk about it, but if you're still here, that means you're curious what I think, and with that, here we go. I'm not going to give a beat-by-beat plot synopsis because the reality is it's a very dense book. In terms of reading, this definitely is more like a book and less like a comic book. There are pages and pages that are filled to the brim with text bubbles or blocks that are just very, very, very dense, very, very involved reading. The art, at least to me, was not enough to convey the story. Sometimes I read comics and I don't focus as much on the words and I kind of look at more at what the action scenes are telling us. In this particular book, I feel like the writing is going to carry it much more than the art does. And I honestly think, and there is some nice art in there, but I honestly think that this probably could have made a pretty good novel, not a graphic novel, just based on the density and the descriptions and the length at which characters go to narrate their thoughts and narrate their opinions. Ultimately, what this book is about is Oliver Queen seemingly coming back from the dead. Now, I didn't read anything leading up to this, but I have come to understand that Oliver Queen and Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern, were on some sort of mission when their plane exploded and vaporized, and they were lost. And the world went on without them. All their friends, their family, everybody went on because that's all they could do. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he just reappears. And he's fighting crime and being his normal quirky self in Star City when Batman stumbles upon him and a couple other characters. And they're like, hey, dude, where the hell have you been? And he's like, what are you talking about? And it takes a long time to kind of build up what ultimately does happen to him, which is a very goofy comic plot, but it works because it's comic books, not based in reality at all. Not that comic books have to be, but again, I do go back to my beloved Dark Knight Returns, and at least the thought process and the world he was coming into and the way he re-entered the world made a little more sense than this. But essentially, and to the namesake of the book, Quiver, he was basically just a shell. Hal Jordan, having some sort of powers as the Green Lantern, was able to rebuild the Green Lantern. I'm sorry, the Green Arrow, by taking a fragment of his essence from Superman and rebuilding him. So he is the old character that most people remember from a certain point in time and on. There are scars that he got in battle after this date. There's a lot of events that happened after this date, and it's not really clear, as my dog trips over the microphone. You're okay. It's not really clear to him why he is that way, and he actually doesn't think anything's wrong. It's everybody else around him that's like, hey, something's not quite right with you. Anyways, we come to find out that Hal had recreated his body, and the real Green Arrow, the real Oliver Queen, is in this basically place like heaven. And he's just hanging out, and he's like, I don't want to come back. Meanwhile, on Earth, there's a very weird plot going on with this character trying to resurrect demons, and these demons can inhabit people's bodies. And they're going to use him. That's why he stumbled across this fact that Oliver Queen was a shell of a man, and he was going to basically transport himself into this demon plane and then come back as a demon and take over Oliver's body, therefore giving him this super strength, not really strength, but all the great things that Green Arrow is known for, the dexterity and the movement and the young body, so that he can continue his life basically in another person's body. And it gets weird. There's a lot of demons in here. There's a demon that can turn into a man and then turn back. What was his name? Did I write it down? It was very bizarre. Etrigan, the demon. And it got this weird supernatural element to it. It kind of reminded me of like an episode of Constantine, or something that I would watch on the Sci-Fi Channel, where it was this weird layering between grounded in reality and then just batshit crazy. Really, for lack of a better word. Ultimately, all's well as ends well, and the real Oliver Queen realizes that he has to come back, and he does return to his body, merging his fake doppelganger self with his real self, and therefore becoming one person. What I would have liked to see something a little bit different, reminds me of an episode of Star Trek where Commander Riker teleports off a planet, and the teleport fails, and he actually basically clones himself. But there's two distinct personalities and two distinct people, two distinct career paths. I would have liked if Green Arrow, when he came back, the old Green Arrow and the new Green Arrow could be two separate people. I think that would have been a very interesting storyline to see play out, because as I am introduced to the Green Arrow for all of these pages leading up to that final revelation of kind of what is going on, I'm getting to know this character and his mannerisms and how he acts and everything. And then at the end of the book, I'm led to believe that everything I read didn't matter, because the real Green Arrow is now going to come back. And he's going to assume the body of this other guy. And in a sense, it's kind of this, like, I don't know, I want to say suicide, but it's like he's devouring himself in a way. And none of the characters seem to be concerned by this, or nobody seems to be bothered by it. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into it and I'm trying to make it a more dense subject than it needs to be, but this book touches on that level of density, with the demons and these satanic cults and building up these husks of people to replace themselves, and the thoughts that go into the conversations he had with himself, and all the characters who he left behind, like Canary and all the, his girlfriend and his child and all these people who he meant something to, and them trying to come to terms with their friend is back, but not really their friend, but he is their friend because it's not him, but it's an essence of him. That to me is a much cooler payoff than, hey, everything's all right, see you later. And for that, I feel like this great journey kind of invalidates itself at the end, and it was kind of frustrating. I think they could have done a better job with that if they wanted to take it down this very bizarre road. And I feel like that's what holds this book back ultimately. I still recommend it. I think the art is good. Prepare to read, though. You're going to be reading quite a bit, no doubt about that. There's definitely a lot of words. It's very dense. This book took me a long time to get through. It's over 200 pages. It wasn't something that I blew through easily. It took me a long time to read and really comprehend what was going on because towards the end, like I said, it's zany. But if you are interested in a story like this, then I highly recommend it. And the name of the collection of stories is known as Quiver. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, comment, rate, and subscribe for my good friend Brent. It's important to help him and his channel grow. Thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the funny pages.